There is a moment between lives that almost no one talks about, not because it's secret, but because those who return from it rarely remember it clearly, and those who do remember often describe the same thing. A review, a complete replay of every moment you lived, every choice, every emotion, every person you hurt or helped, every consequence that rippled out from your existence. It sounds beautiful, transcendent, a moment of total clarity before you move on. But what if that review is not what you think it is? What if the experience that feels like judgment or healing or cosmic justice is actually something else? Something designed not to free you, but to bind you. You've felt it before, haven't you? That strange sense that your regrets are heavier than they should be, that your guilt lingers longer than it needs to, that even your good memories carry a weight, a pull, a feeling that something is unfinished, incomplete. And so you return. Not because you chose to, but because you felt you had to. Because something inside you became convinced that the story wasn't over. The life review is spoken of with reverence across cultures and spiritual traditions. It is treated as sacred, an encounter with truth itself. But no one asks the simple question that should be obvious. Who is showing you these memories? Who decides which moments are highlighted, which emotions are amplified, which threads are left dangling in your awareness? And most importantly, why does the review always seem to end with the same conclusion? That you need to go back. That there is more to learn, more to balance, more to fix, more to complete. You were told this is wisdom, divine teaching, the soul's journey toward perfection. But what if it's something closer to repetition? What if it's not enlightenment at all, but the most sophisticated form of control ever devised? A control so subtle that it feels like love, so convincing that it feels like your own deepest truth. What if the life review is not revealing your path forward, but creating it? When people describe the life review, they speak of overwhelming love, a presence that holds them without judgment. They see their entire life from every perspective, including the perspectives of people they interacted with. They feel what others felt because of their actions, pain they caused, joy they created, fear they triggered, love they inspired. It is presented as the ultimate teaching moment, the moment when you finally understand the full weight and impact of your existence. But something strange happens in these accounts, something that appears in nearly every description, regardless of culture or belief system. The person always reaches the same conclusion. They always decide or are told that they need to come back, that the lesson isn't complete, that there is unfinished business, a soul contract unfulfilled, a karmic debt unpaid. The language changes depending on the belief system, but the result is always the same. Return, reincarnate, go back. Why is that? If the review is truly about understanding, why does it never lead to release? If it's about transcendence, why does it always circle back to the material world? And if it's guided by beings of pure love and light, why do people return feeling burdened rather than free? Why do they come back carrying a sense of responsibility, of incompleteness, of spiritual debt? Consider this carefully. What if the review is not showing you truth but creating attachment? What if the beings guiding you through it are not evil but simply operating within a system? A system that requires participation, a system that needs you to believe the story is unfinished, that needs you to feel responsible for outcomes, that needs you to accept the narrative of growth through repeated incarnation. You felt this in life too. The sense that you were always one step away from completion, one more relationship, one more achievement, one more healing, one more breakthrough. But the finish line kept moving, didn't it? The goal kept shifting just as you approached it. What if death works the same way? What if the life review is the mechanism that ensures you never quite reach the end? The life review is described as objective. You see everything exactly as it happened. No distortion, no bias, pure truth. But think about what that actually means. Memory is never objective, even in life. Your memories shift constantly. They are influenced by emotion, by current belief, by the story you tell yourself about who you are and what your life means. Scientists have proven this. Every time you remember something, you change it slightly. You reconstruct it based on who you are now, not who you were then. And if that's true while you're alive with a functioning brain and a continuous sense of identity, what happens when you die? What happens when your memories are shown back to you by something else? Something external, something that knows how to frame them, how to highlight the moments that will create the strongest emotional response, how to make you feel responsible for outcomes you couldn't control, how to amplify guilt, regret, and longing until they feel like absolute truth. This is not manipulation in the usual sense. It's not cruelty or deception. It's something more subtle and far more effective. It's the way a story is told. Think about the difference between showing you a moment of anger and showing you the years of pain that led to it. The difference between revealing a choice and revealing all the conditioning, all the circumstances, all the limitations that made the choice feel inevitable. Context changes everything. And whoever controls the context controls the meaning. The beings in the life review are often described as wise, as loving, as radiant with compassion. And perhaps they are. But wisdom and love do not always mean freedom. Sometimes they mean guidance, sometimes they mean structure, and sometimes they mean keeping you within the system that they themselves inhabit. They may genuinely believe they are helping you. They may be completely sincere in their conviction that you need to return. You've met people like this in life. People who genuinely wanted to help you, but whose help always led you back to their worldview, their rules, their version of what growth looks like, their definition of what it means to be complete. What if the afterlife has the same dynamic? What if the beings who guide you are themselves bound by beliefs they don't question? In almost every near-death account, the person feels drawn to return to life. They describe it as a choice, but listen carefully to how they speak about it. They felt they had to come back, for their children who needed them, for their purpose that wasn't fulfilled, for lessons they hadn't learned, for relationships that required healing. The choice was framed in such a way that only one option felt right, only one option felt loving, only one option felt spiritually mature. This is not force. It's something far more effective than force. It's the creation of inevitability. When you are shown your life from a perspective that emphasizes unfinished threads, loose ends, and karmic imbalances, the conclusion becomes obvious. You must return to resolve it. Any other choice would be selfish, irresponsible, a failure to grow, a refusal of your spiritual duty. But who decided those threads were unfinished? Who decided that balance is required in the first place? Who decided that lessons must be learned through repeated incarnation rather than through direct knowing? Who created the rules of this system, and why does no one question them? These questions are rarely asked because the life review feels too profound to question. The emotions are too overwhelming, the presence of light too convincing, the sense of love too complete. But intensity is not the same as truth. And feeling loved does not mean you are being freed. Some of the most controlling relationships involve genuine love. Some of the most restrictive systems are maintained by people who truly believe they are helping. Think about the most persuasive people you've ever met. They didn't force you. They didn't threaten you. They made you want what they wanted. They framed choices so that your decision felt like your own, even when the outcome was predetermined. They gave you the illusion of agency while guiding you toward the conclusion they needed you to reach. The life review operates on the same principle. It makes you believe that returning is your idea, your duty, your soul's deepest desire, and so you step back into the cycle without ever realizing there might have been another door, another option, another possibility that was never presented to you, one that no one showed you because showing it would break the system. There's a pattern in these experiences that most people overlook because they're too focused on the emotional content. The life review doesn't just show you your past, it interprets it for you. It gives meaning to events that might have been random, meaningless, or simply the result of living in a chaotic material world. It connects actions to outcomes in ways that create narrative continuity. It turns your life into a story with a moral, a lesson, a purpose. And stories with morals always have something left to resolve. They always point toward continuation. They always suggest that the meaning is incomplete until certain conditions are met. This is where identity becomes a trap, because the entire review is built on the assumption that you are the person who lived that life, that the memories belong to you, that the emotions, the choices, the relationships, the consequences are yours to carry forward into the next incarnation. But what if they aren't? What if that assumption is the foundation of the entire deception? What if the you that existed in that life was only ever a temporary pattern, a role played in a specific context, with specific limitations, in a specific body, in a specific time and place? And what if the life review takes that temporary pattern and solidifies it into an eternal identity? An identity that must now continue, evolve, balance itself, and resolve itself across multiple lifetimes? In depth psychology, this is called identification. The process by which you mistake a role for your essence, the process by which a mask becomes a face, the process by which something temporary is treated as permanent. And once you are identified with something, you are bound to it. Not by chains, not by force, but by the belief that this is who you are, that this is what you are responsible for, that this is what you must continue to be. The life review doesn't show you the truth of what you are beneath the role. It shows you the story of who you were in the role. And then it asks the question that seems empowering, but is actually binding. What will you do next? How will you grow from this? What will you resolve in your next life? The question sounds like spiritual maturity, but it's based on a false premise. The premise that you are the character in the story rather than the awareness that made the story possible. Every religion and spiritual tradition has a version of this mechanism. Karma in Hinduism and Buddhism, sin and redemption in Christianity, soul contracts in New Age spirituality, ancestral debts in indigenous traditions. The names change, the cultural context shifts, but the structure remains identical across all of them. You are told that your actions have consequences that extend beyond this life, that justice requires balance, that growth requires return. That evolution happens through repeated incarnation. But consider the function of these beliefs rather than their content. They all create continuity. They all ensure that the story doesn't end. They all make the self responsible for outcomes that might have been impersonal, contextual, or simply the result of living in a limited material form with incomplete information and constrained choices. And they all require a record, a memory, a review that shows you why you must continue, why ending would be irresponsible, why release would be premature, why transcendence must wait until every debt is paid, every lesson learned, every relationship balanced. This is not about good or evil. It's not about malicious entities trying to farm your energy or trap your soul. It's about systems. Systems that sustain themselves through participation. And the most effective systems don't force participation through fear or punishment. They make participants believe that continuing is growth, that staying is enlightenment, that return is ascension, that the cycle itself is the path. You see this pattern everywhere in life if you know how to look for it. Institutions that claim to free you, but keep you circling within their structure. Educational systems that promise completion, but always reveal another level. Therapeutic models that promise healing, but always find another wound. Teachers who promise liberation, but whose teachings always require more lessons, more practices, more years of dedication. The life review is the ultimate version of this pattern. It takes the raw, chaotic material of your existence and reshapes it into a narrative that requires continuation. It makes you the author of a story that was written long before you arrived. And then it asks you to write the next chapter, and the next forever. Most people accept this without question, because the alternative is terrifying. The alternative requires asking a question that dismantles everything. What if there's nothing to resolve? What if there never was? The most unsettling possibility is this: the life review is not revealing what you owe, it's creating what you owe. It's not showing you unfinished business. It's manufacturing the sense of incompletion. It's taking a life that simply happened and reframing it as a life that requires continuation. Because if you left without attachment, without regret, without guilt, without the feeling that something was left undone, where would you go? What would you become? Would you dissolve into the void? Would you merge with something beyond form? Would you cease to be an individual self entirely? And more importantly, what would happen to the system that depends on your return? What would happen to the beings who guide you if you no longer needed guidance? What would happen to the cycle if participants stopped participating? This is the deeper function of memory. Memory is not just information, it's attachment. Every memory carries an emotional charge, a sense of self, a feeling of having been there, having done that, having been that person. And when those memories are shown to you in a heightened state, when they are reviewed with cosmic significance, when they are interpreted as spiritually meaningful, they become chains. Not chains of punishment, not chains of karma in the sense of cosmic justice, chains of identity, chains of belief, chains of the assumption that you are what you remember, that you are the sum of your experiences, that you are the character who must continue the story. You think the life review is about accountability, but accountability assumes separation. It assumes there is a you who acted, and a world that received the action, and a debt that connects the two. But what if none of that is true at the deepest level? What if the separation was always an illusion, and the review is what makes it feel real? What if the review is what creates the self that must return? This is what the mystics warned about for thousands of years, not reincarnation itself, but unconscious reincarnation, the kind that happens because you still believe you are the character, because you still think the story is yours, because you still feel responsible for a narrative that was never more than a dream that you're being convinced to dream again. The life review doesn't wake you up from the dream. It puts you deeper into it, and it does so with love, with light, with overwhelming emotion that makes questioning feel like betrayal. If this is true, then every return is not progress. It's repetition, not evolution, it's forgetting. You don't come back wiser, you come back convinced that this time will be different, that this life will resolve what the last one didn't, that this incarnation will finally bring the peace, the understanding, the completion, the enlightenment you were promised in the review. But it won't, because the structure ensures it can't. The game is designed so that winning means playing again. The lesson is designed so that learning it requires forgetting it first. The debt is designed so that paying it creates new debt. This is not failure on your part. This is the function of the system itself. The cost of this is not suffering, though suffering is abundant. Suffering is expected. Suffering is even celebrated as a teacher. The real cost is time. Infinite time spent circling the same patterns, believing each cycle is unique. Infinite time spent relearning what you forgot the moment you agreed to return. Infinite time spent in a maze that has no center, only more corridors that look like progress but lead back to the entrance. You've felt this already, haven't you? The sense that you've lived this before. Not in the vague, mystical sense of past life memories, in the immediate, visceral sense. The same emotional patterns showing up in different relationships, the same internal conflicts dressed in different circumstances, the same fears, the same desires, the same struggles that feel personal but are actually universal. You thought this was karma working itself out, the universe giving you repeated chances to get it right. But what if it's just repetition? What if the reason you keep encountering the same lessons is not because you haven't learned them, but because the system is designed to make you think you haven't? What if the feeling of incompletion is not a reflection of your spiritual state, but a feature of the mechanism itself? And the life review is the moment when that design is reinforced. When the illusion of progress is sold to you so convincingly that you step back in willingly, eagerly, feeling chosen, feeling purposeful, feeling like this return is your soul's deepest calling, while the door you didn't see, the option you were never shown, closes silently behind you in the overwhelming light. How many times have you already done this? How many times have you stood in that review, felt that love, made that choice? The question is not whether the beings in the life review are malicious. The question is whether they are free. And if they aren't free, if they themselves are part of the system, operating within its rules, bound by its structure, then what they offer you is not liberation. It's company. It's shared captivity dressed as cosmic purpose. It's the blind leading the blind with absolute conviction and genuine love. This is the hardest thing to accept, that love is not always truth, that light is not always freedom, that something can feel profoundly right, can feel like the deepest truth you've ever encountered, and still be part of the mechanism that keeps you bound. The heart can be convinced of things the awareness knows are false. Emotion can overwhelm knowing. Intensity can feel like validity. You've experienced this in relationships. People who loved you deeply, genuinely, completely, but whose love required you to stay small, to stay in the story they needed you to play, to be the person their worldview required you to be. It wasn't manipulation in the conscious sense, it was structure. It was the way they understood love. It was the best they could offer from within their own limitations. And it kept both of you locked in a pattern neither could name or escape. The life review works the same way. It loves you into continuity. It guides you into return. It makes staying in the cycle feel like the only compassionate choice, the only responsible choice, the only spiritually mature choice. And because the emotion is real, because the presence is genuine, because the light is actually there, you never think to question the outcome. You never think to ask whether love and truth are the same thing. But they're not. They never were. And the moment you see that distinction, something shifts. Not externally. The beings don't change. The light doesn't dim. The review doesn't stop. What changes is internal. A space opens. A question forms. A possibility emerges that wasn't there before. The possibility that you are not the story they're showing you. That you are not the debt they're describing. That you are not the character that must continue. That you are something else entirely. Something that was never born and therefore cannot die. Something that has no karma because it never acted. Something that needs no completion because it was never incomplete. You begin to remember, not with memory, but with recognition. You are not the story. You never were. You are what watches the story. You are the awareness that makes all stories possible. The life review will come. If the accounts are true, if the pattern holds, it waits for everyone. And when it does, you will see your life again. You will feel everything. You will be surrounded by beings of light. You will be offered the chance to return, to balance, to grow, to complete what was left undone. And in that moment, the only thing that will matter is whether you remember this, not as doctrine, not as belief, not as another story to replace the old story, but as a question. A quiet, internal question that cuts through the overwhelming emotion and asks with simple clarity, who is showing me this? Who benefits from my return? And what happens if I don't choose the story they're offering? There may be no answer. The beings may not know. They may be as convinced as you once were that the cycle is necessary, that growth requires incarnation, that completion requires return. They may offer you love and light and every beautiful promise imaginable. And all of it may be sincere, but sincerity is not truth, and their conviction is not your obligation. There may only be silence beyond the question. A vast open silence where something other than the system can emerge. Something that doesn't need your memories to exist. Something that doesn't need your identity to continue. Something that doesn't require story or meaning or purpose. The trap is not the review itself. The review is just information. Light interacting with consciousness. The trap is the belief that you must respond to it, that you must resolve it, that you must step back into form because the review has convinced you something is incomplete. But completion is not something you achieve through endless incarnations. It's not something you earn through balancing karma or fulfilling contracts. Completion is not in the future. It's not in the next life or the next lesson. It's what you already are beneath the story, beneath the identity, beneath the memories and the guilt and the longing and the sense of unfinished business. You are not your memories. You are not your lessons. You are not your karma. You are not the character in the cosmic narrative. You are not what the review shows you. You are the awareness that makes all of it possible. The consciousness that watches. The knowing that exists before story, before identity, before birth and death. And awareness does not reincarnate. It does not need to. It simply is, and has always been.